urgently. The Russian Federation is paralyzed, a real disaster. This video broke the internet. Panic in the Kremlin, and a riot is brewing in Moscow. Russians are shouting and are ready to resort to radical methods. Putin makes an urgent decision. Zelensky has put the enemy under pressure. This blew the Russians to pieces. The fire of revenge did its job. More on all of this coming up. Watch until the end. Hello, this is Ukraine Today with Renata Aslanova bringing you the latest events. A disaster has struck the Russian Federation. Everything has gone off the rails. Putin can no longer control the situation. The trap is closing in on the enemy.
Honestly, this is just fucking unbelievable. What the hell are you raising prices for like this when the country is facing such a problem right now with a fuel shortage? Do you even realize what kind of problems you're causing?
Russians are directing their entire rich vocabulary at the so-called gasoline magnates, especially in the Moscow region. It seems the heart of the Russian Federation is in the grip of serious problems. People are rebelling.
You should be flogged, lined up in front of your gas stations, have your pants pulled down, bent over, and whipped properly.
While some gas stations are cashing in, others have stopped selling gasoline altogether. For example, that's what happened to a Novosibirsk chain, and 92-octane has disappeared into oblivion. And it looks like it's for a long time.
The gasoline shortage in Siberia is due to the halt in supplies from the Omsk oil refinery, the largest one east of the Urals.
The Far Eastern regions aren't faring any better. The gasoline crisis is in full swing.
In the Far East, the most difficult situation has developed in the Khabarovsk region. In the Verkhneburansky district, a limit of 10 liters per person has been imposed on gasoline sales. Problems with fuel supplies have arisen in Sovetskaya Gavan and Vanino, both located on the Pacific coast.
Tensions are reaching their peak. One after another, people are making loud appeals, and all of them are against the authorities. Something furious is brewing.
I think it's time for us to start using our heads, to turn on our brains and begin to unite. No one is going to save us. Let's express our protest peacefully by declaring our lack of confidence in this system of power.
However, this is not surprising. Oil product production in Russia has plummeted by almost 10% after the drone strikes. Z channels are writing about this everywhere. There's simply no point in hiding it.
Ukrainian drone raids, which since the beginning of August have managed to hit 28 oil refineries in Russia, have brought fuel and other oil product production down to its lowest level in many years. As a result, production volumes at oil refineries have become the lowest in at least the past 5 years.
Putin, in agony, wants to pour billions into the refineries against the backdrop of Ukrainian deep strikes. An emergency decree.
Oil refineries will be entitled to subsidies even if the market wholesale prices for diesel fuel and gasoline significantly exceed the threshold prices. The changes will be in effect from October 1st to May 1st.
Supposedly, the subsidies are intended to encourage Russian oil companies to continue supplying gasoline and diesel fuel to the domestic market. But it seems that even this won't help Russia get out of this hole.
What has happened is, in my opinion, truly a major success. According to our data, the enemy's gasoline shortage is up to 20% of their needs. There are different estimates, from 13 to 20%. But it has been confirmed that the shortage is already significant, in our view, up to 20% as of today.
Now it's official. The fuel agony in Russia is gaining momentum and reaching even the most remote areas. The Kremlin is in a panic. This is a hopeless situation. Putin is trying to urgently come up with a plan of action, but everything is going wrong. You have to see this with your own eyes.
An absolute anti-record for Putin. Cars in Russia are ceasing to be a means of transportation and are turning into a luxury item. After all, it's becoming increasingly difficult for residents of Erefia to fuel their iron steeds. Despite the Kremlin extracting enormous amounts of oil, the country is facing a shortage of gasoline and diesel fuel.
As ridiculous as it sounds, in a country that used to be a gas station, a raw materials appendage for China, an economy built on pipelines, now it can't even provide its own population and businesses with oil and petroleum products.
The main culprit behind the catastrophic fuel shortage across the border has been the Ukrainian armed forces and their precision strikes on the occupiers' oil refining infrastructure. So by the end of September, oil refineries across Russia were idling at least 38% of their primary oil processing capacity, or 338,000 tons per day. For a former gas station country, this is a colossal market collapse. Recently, the fuel shortage has become acutely felt even at the front lines. At regular Russian gas stations, you can hardly find 95-octane fuel in most regions, even if you search high and low.
In particular, some individual gas stations have started temporarily limiting the amount of fuel sold per customer. Some allow up to 20 liters, others up to 30 liters per purchase. And at other gas stations in some regions of Russia, the sale of certain types of fuel was temporarily suspended altogether. That is, in some places there was no 92-octane gasoline available, in others there was no 95, and so on. At the same time, at small independent private gas stations that are not part of the so-called vertically integrated oil companies, there was a sharp increase in fuel prices.
This last factor only made the situation in the country worse. Along with the shortage at gas stations came sky-high prices. Over this summer, the price of gasoline and diesel in Russia increased by a solid 15 to 20%. And starting in the fall, the prices displayed on gas station signs across the border have been changing almost daily, each time adding another ruble or two to the cost of fuel. But even such an increase is not enough to cover the costs of Russian oil refineries, which are now constantly under attack from Ukrainian drones.
The scale of the shortage is such that this is a desperate attempt by hitting the pockets of oil producers, of oil companies already struggling and seeing their profits collapse, many of which have become unprofitable, to somehow supply the domestic market.
Things are even worse for Russian oil traders on foreign markets than they are domestically. If previously the government compensated for the price difference through exports, today Russian oil isn't being bought in Europe even for pennies. Which means that cheap gasoline within Russia itself is no longer something to expect.
There's a major problem with fuel, and the crisis will only get worse. So, accordingly, oil companies can't make money on foreign markets because of the artificially strong ruble and falling oil prices. Right now, Russian oil is trading at $55, $57 per barrel, taking into account all the discounts and markdowns to the direct price. And that's it. So now the oil companies, with their hands out, are asking the government for help. Lower taxes, reduced mineral extraction tax rates, export duties, and excise taxes. But the authorities, they can't do that. Their budget is falling apart. There's a hole in the budget.
And the Russian economy has nothing to patch that hole with. As a result, the Kremlin couldn't come up with anything better than to announce the start of fuel imports into the country while simultaneously halting all exports of gasoline and diesel from Russia.
So they decided to import gasoline. Here we have Putin's victory. He said Russia wouldn't be a gas station country. I think this is a victory. We really need to highlight the fact that now Russia will be buying gasoline. How can you not recall Churchill, who said that when the Soviet Union starts buying wheat, that's when it will come to an end, right? So in much the same way, when Putin's Russia starts buying gasoline, after a while it too will come to an end, just like the Soviet Union once did.
The Ukrainian authorities have also actively set out to help bring about Russia's end. Alongside drone attacks on oil refineries, Kyiv is also hitting Putin's economy hard on the diplomatic front.
If Ukraine synchronizes its strategy to reduce Russia's resource base together with its allies, with Europe, with America, with Japan, and so on, that is, sanctions will be imposed very quickly. And countries like South Korea and Singapore will simply be afraid to supply gasoline to Russia so as not to fall under sanctions.
In such a hopeless situation, the Kremlin is grasping at the last straw. Disregarding all environmental standards, the government has practically legalized counterfeit fuel in the hope that at least it will saturate the Russian gasoline market. However, analysts assure that this decision, on the contrary, will drive the final nail into the coffin of oil refining in Russia. And not only that,
the authorities have decided to tackle the gasoline shortage with methods that cause suffocation and damage car engines. Deputy Prime Minister Novak has proposed bringing back for 6 months a special gasoline additive that was banned back in 2016. They want to use it to increase gasoline production, but there's a catch. This additive has a negative impact on the environment, damages cars, and raises the level of nitrogen oxides in exhaust fumes, which settle in the air at a height of 60 centimeters above the ground. It is dangerous for people to inhale these vapors. Symptoms of poisoning include slowed reactions, suffocation, and a bluish tint to the hands and ears.
And such a surrogate fuel with toxic additives will instantly turn an engine into a pile of scrap metal. After just 6 months of driving on this kind of fuel, a car will become unusable, just like all of Russia's public transport. Then, without proper gasoline and diesel, the entire multi-million strong country would be forced to go back to good old horse-drawn carts.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now. No gasoline, and on top of that, there's also a problem with electricity. Belgorod and Kurshino have been left in the dark. Russians have received a serious response from our side. It seems that peace is just a dream for Russians now. Ukrainian ballistic strikes are already hitting deep inside Russia, swarming attacks and precise hits. Flamingos and Neptunes are locked on target, and the enemy is in confusion. The pressure continues. What new strike should we expect? Watch the rest in the report.
The consequences of the war unleashed by Russia are starting to return to its own territory, with Ukrainian drones and long-range missiles. The General Staff does not deny that after Belgorod, Muscovites too may soon experience what a blackout is like firsthand.
Metaphors don't work. That's Badyani on the right there, 10th, 12th, 14th, darkness. Badyani is on the left, darkness. The Badyani Forest, a truly beautiful and expansive area. Yesenin, the intersection of these two significant locations. Metaphors don't work.
Meanwhile, two more Russian regions, Tyumen and Sverdlovsk Oblasts, have introduced restrictions on gasoline sales, no more than 30 liters per person. Previously, this new rule affected the Khabarovsk Krai, Chelyabinsk Oblast, and the occupied Crimea. All these lines and empty gas stations are due to daily attacks on oil refineries. Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi stated that in September, under the Deep Strike program, 70 strikes were reported on Russian territory.
We are destroying the aggressor country's production of fuel and lubricants, explosives, as well as other components of the Russian military-industrial complex. Among other things, oil production in Russia has decreased by 21%.
The intensification and expansion of Ukraine's so-called long-range sanctions across Russian territory became one of the main topics at the president's meeting with the security bloc.
Ukrainian long-range weaponry is becoming significantly more advanced. We are constantly working on this and have already provided a wide range of opportunities for production, the necessary funding, and all the required support. We need to scale up their use just as tangibly. We have clear plans regarding this for the coming months. Everything must be implemented. Ukrainian precision is already visible. There should be more. It is absolutely fair that Ukraine strikes back in response. These are targeted strikes. Unlike Russia, we know what we want to achieve. Of course, peace.
Currently, the carriers of sanctions deep into Russian territory are the Flamingo and Neptune missiles. The company Firepoint announced the launch of production of the first ones at the end of the summer. At that time, a video of the Flamingo launch appeared online. OSINT analysts suggested, however, that they flew toward the territory of occupied Crimea. The publication Welt reported that it was these missiles that destroyed the FSB base on the peninsula. 3 missiles left craters 15 meters in diameter. At that time, German journalists also reported that 50 missiles roll off the assembly line each month, with plans to increase that to 200 per month. And now, the Russians have supposedly displayed the wreckage of a downed Flamingo missile. According to their information, it was hit on Russian territory by a Buk system at an altitude of 100 meters and a speed of 600 kilometers per hour. Judging by the serial number, the occupiers assume this is the 106th munition produced in September. There is no reliable confirmation that the Flamingo destroyed the FSB base. Military analysts believe that behind these successful strikes, and not just this one, could have been Neptune itself. Today, 3 modifications of it have already been tested and put into serial production in the Ukrainian defense industry, and a 4th is being prepared.
Testing is currently underway. This is the long-range Neptune, the one that can reach 1,000 kilometers. It is currently undergoing tests. It has already achieved, let's say, positive hits, and further on, the process of putting it into serial production will proceed in parallel. I believe this series of Neptunes makes the country more capable of realizing our combat potential, because not every country in the world possesses cruise missiles, especially cruise missiles that in the future will be both sea and land-based and, let's say, with various ranges.
For obvious reasons, Ukrainian weapons manufacturers do not openly discuss strikes against the aggressor. But President Zelensky has admitted to the press that the defense forces even combine them. And this, analysts acknowledge, is a successful practice that Ukrainians can adopt from their enemy.
This missile is likely to be produced in larger quantities, but at the same time it is cheaper compared to the high-tech Neptune missile. And here there are a whole range of combinations. For example, the advanced Neptune missile, being significantly less detectable and remarkably more accurate, can be effectively used to clear a strategic corridor, or conversely, a series of Flamingo missiles, which are highly visible but very economically priced, can be strategically used as effective decoys to draw away the enemy's formidable air defense forces, while the less visible but incredibly precise Neptune missile deftly slips through and delivers a precisely targeted strike.
The Ukrainian defense industry is no longer what it was at the start of the full-scale Russian aggression. The country's military and political leadership has finally realized that only local arms manufacturers can guarantee stable supplies of weapons to the front, provided, of course, that there is adequate funding. But with each passing day, as the sky is increasingly terrorized by unknown drones, Europeans and Scandinavians are showing more interest not only in Ukraine's experience, but also in cooperating with Ukraine in the production of weapons suited to the realities of modern warfare.
When will the catastrophe finally engulf Russia? Share your opinion in comments, like this video and stay updated with important news. More to come.